Welcome to the Quality of Love podcast. I am your host, Tyrone Dixon, nationally certified life and relationship coach, husband, father to two beautiful princesses, and CEO and founder of a Rose Through Concrete Consulting. Thank you guys for taking the time out to listen in with us tonight. We really appreciate it. You can probably hear it in my voice. I can barely hold it in my excitement, everyone. We're back. I'm so excited to be back. It was very difficult for me to take that break and to take some time off. But we're back to answering questions for you about relationships as well as exposing those narcissists that we may have in our relationships as well. But before we do that, just want to bring everybody up to speed. We're hovering around about 23,000 downloads total over the life of the Quality of Love podcast. And I just want to say thank you. You guys hear me say it a lot. I will continue to say it. So get prepared to hear it, right? The gratitude piece is huge for me. So thank you all, everyone that's downloaded, subscribed, liked, followed our Facebook page. Just encourage us to continue to move forward in a positive manner. We're very excited to continue to deliver you some good content here, right? With that being said, I just want to give you a rundown of what the new version of the show will look like. You'll still get those same question and answers, of course, about narcissists as well as your relationship questions. But we switched it up a little bit. We used to call the segment Insight from a Former Narcissist. Now we're just going to be flat out with it and expose these narcissists, right? That's the new segment of, it used to be formerly called Insight from a Former Narcissist, now called Exposing Narcissists within those relationship settings. We also have a new segment, and we will debut that today on today's episode, but that segment is titled Dead That Ish. And the idea behind Dead That Ish, or where it came about, after having some conversation with a group of trusted advisors, I'll call them, they encouraged me to start to do more reaching out to my audience. So start to try to engage the audience in different ways. And as I was sitting and brainstorming, one of the best ways that I think we can engage our audience going forward is allowing them the opportunity to dead a relationship that they've had in the past, or dead a partner that they've had in the past, right on our show, right here. So we'll call that segment and section Dead That Ish, which I'll get it started today. So stay tuned to that. Going back to our original format, you guys know I love to start these shows off with a quote of the week. This quote of the week comes from an anonymous author, but it reads, "When you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself." Once again, that quote is, when you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. And I've had that quote in my bag for a while, but I think this quote, the light clicked for me in terms of this quote when I realized that in a lot of cases, I was telling people yes, and I felt resentment towards that, right? So there would be instances or situations in which I agreed to do something that I know deep down I did not want to do at the time, but I did it anyway. And essentially what I did was I moved forward in a manner that let me know that it was something I didn't want to do. And at the end of whatever it was, so for example, I used to constantly go out to parties knowing that I was no longer a party person. My party days had been over based off my college experiences. But even after college, I would still go to parties knowing that I didn't want to go. And it was inevitable. Something would happen at the party, or I would do something stupid and end up regretting the decision to even go in the first place. And once I started to do things like that, I realized that I was giving people too many yes answers, and those yes answers coincided with me feeling resentment. So after a while, I decided that if I didn't want to do something, no matter what it was, no matter how difficult it may be to discuss with someone, I just wasn't going to do it. And that was just a way for me to protect my own energy, so to speak. So use that quote, take it, protect your energy at all costs. All right. You guys see me winding up, man. Let's expose these narcissists first. Switching the show up a little bit. Let's get these narcissists in these relationship settings exposed, get those answers or those questions answered, and then we'll shift over to the relationship side of things. Question number 1 from Exposing Narcissists. Can a narcissist bond with their family? Once again, that question is, can a narcissist bond with their family? I'd say yes, absolutely. You'll find if you do deep enough research on a narcissist or simply pay close enough attention to their behaviors and how they interact and treat their family, I think what you'll find is there are people within the narcissist family which they gravitate to a little more than others. So, for example, when I struggled with some of my narcissist ways and some of my narcissist tendencies, a lot of that was enabled by my mom. Right. So my mom, she's tended at the time to see me with a tinted lens that was all sunny and rainbows and butterflies. And in a lot of cases, she would enable my behavior. I share that story with you to say this. In a lot of cases, there's at least 2 or 3 family members that a narcissist is extremely close with that has enabled them to display the narcissistic tendencies and not held them accountable for that behavior. So yeah, there are instances in which a narcissist is close or has a bond with their family, but it's usually a select few members of the family. Because if you've had siblings, if you've had cousins or anything that you've grown up close to, you realize that there's some tension that grows in that situation. And after a while, you just don't want to be bothered with the person who's a narcissist and constantly living in a self-absorbed world. So again, you'll have a few people that they bond extremely tight with, but for the most part, bonding with family comes when in terms of talking about a narcissist, bonding with family comes with whoever continues and allows that person to be enabled and do the narcissistic things that they do. They usually gravitate and are closest to those people. Question number 2. What would be the one reason the narcissist wants to change? Once again, that question is, what would be the one reason that a narcissist wants to change? I've heard this term before. I've never used it, right? And I don't know if it's an official term, but again, I can tell you based off my experiences that certainly a narcissist can change. And the one reason or instance that I've seen a narcissist change when they've had an extremely traumatic experience. All right. So when I say extremely traumatic experience, something happened to this person that shifted their whole worldview and made them think in terms of a different way. Now, that could be a host of things. In my situation, I can think back and remember fondly my narcissistic traumatic experience that shifted my worldview was actually having to move back, or the feeling, I should say, because it ended up turning out great. But the feeling of having to move back to Syracuse, New York, excuse me. Once I had left Syracuse, and I've shared this in the past, but I'll share it again to bring everyone up to speed because I know we got a new audience. But I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York, left after I graduated high school and went to college in Buffalo. When I left the limits of Syracuse, I made a promise to myself that I would never come back here. I would never live here again because I really believe that Syracuse, New York was a place where dreams die, right? There wasn't a lot going on. Half of the people that grew up here were born and raised in poverty. So just looking at the economic statistics, I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to move back. An unfortunate situation happened. A fortunate situation, I call it now, but it was truly unfortunate at the time in which I was forced from my apartment and I had to move back to Syracuse. And I can vividly remember even till this day, the transition back home to Syracuse, driving here was like, I felt really, really down and really low about myself. And it forced me to assess kind of the way I was living up until that point and what I really wanted to do and how I really wanted to live going forward. And once I kind of connected the dots, which took a very long time, and actually I still struggle with different areas, but once I was fortunately able to connect the dots, I realized that huge traumatic experience for me, having to move back, forced me to reassess my life and look at my life for what it was. And I was a bad person at that time. So it was at that moment that I made the commitment to put the steps in place to try to be a better person. And fortunately, up until now, I'm able to do that. So I share that long-winded story with you to say that the only time I've seen a narcissist change their ways is when they've had something extremely traumatic happen to them. And once that trauma kind of seeps in, It forces them to self-reflect and reflect on their life, where they came and where they are now. And a strong individual will put the right steps into place to prevent them from backslipping or backsliding into someone who's self-absorbed and does not want you to have a social support network. Question number 3. Why did an ex-narcissist contact me and tell me happy birthday after months of no contact? Once again, that question is, why did an ex-narcissist contact me and tell me happy birthday after months of no contact? It's a control play. Frankly, it's I like to say narcissist 101 or narcissist behavior tendencies behavior 101. A narcissist will often go months of time or months without reaching out to you, in the hopes that once they do reach out to you, you fall madly in love with them, or you tend to let down your walls or your defense a little bit. I would invite you to consider that and to ignore them if you have not done so already, or ignore them moving forward. One thing that I tell people all the time who end up in relationships with narcissistic individuals is that their behavior is probably not going to change. There's a pretty good chance that it's not going to change unless they have that traumatic experience. And most narcissists, unfortunately, they don't have that traumatic experience where they're examining their life and looking at their life for what it is and taking the proper steps to make it a better life. So that's a control tactic commonly used by narcissists. It's just a way of gauging to see how interested you would be in being under their control again. Question number 4. When does a narcissist use the word we? Once again, that question is, when does a narcissist use the word we? Anytime a narcissist uses the word we, it's a manipulation tactic to try to get you to either A, view them as a victim, or B, to let down your walls of defense, or your walls of accountability in a lot of cases with narcissists, because it's holding them accountable. So what they'll do is they'll use the word we to make it seem like you're a team and you're on the same page and you're in things together, in order to, again, just manipulate you into believing what you, or not believing what you actually see, aka thinking that you're crazy, or just, again, trying to keep you under control, trying to keep you on the side of enabling them to continue to display behaviors. And finally, question number 5. I broke up with my narcissist ex-boyfriend. He had it and didn't, or he heard it, and didn't respond. He usually lashes out and name calls. Does this mean he is done with me too? Once again, that question is, I broke up with my narcissistic ex-boyfriend. He heard it and didn't respond. He usually lashes out and name calls. Does this mean he is done with me too? I would say yes. Probably there's a pretty good chance he is. And when it comes to narcissists, they stop displaying those type of overt behaviors like the lashing out and the name calling when they found a new supply. And just to reiterate, a supply, for those that don't know narcissistic language, a supply is an individual who enables the narcissist to continue their ways and doesn't hold them accountable for their actions. Chances are, in this case, if he did not display the behavior that he typically displays in this situation, he's found a new supply, which it can hurt and it can suck now in the moment. But I promise you, the faster you can get away from a narcissistic individual, the better off you'll be in the long run. And again, I know easier said than done, but if he's not responding in the manner in which he's typically, or you're typically used to him responding, there's a chance he's moved on, or transitioned on to a new supply, someone who's enabling him to continue to be a narcissist. And in that case, again, you win. You win. The further you can get away from a narcissistic individual, the better off for your own mental health. All right. During slow break in between our segments, I want to make sure that we shout out Saran, Humble Fit Miller. Don't forget, we have those King Dixon 1 code for you. You can get $10 off anything on the Etsy site that he has. All quality material. I've been using his workout gear and also his sneakers for my workouts for about 2 years now. So Anytime you need some quality workout gear, some quality casual gear, make sure you hit Saron Miller up, Mr. Humble Fit himself. King Dixon 1 is the code. You'll get $10 off anything on his site. All right, let's hit on some of these relationship questions because they've stockpiled on me, frankly. When I stayed away from my email for the past week or so, when I opened it up, it was like relationship. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to answer some of these questions and continue to move forward in answering your questions about relationships. Question number 1. If my boyfriend keeps telling me that's why I don't want to be with you after every time we argue, how would I fit, or how should I feel, excuse me? How would you take it? But we never break up. Once again, that question is, if my boyfriend keeps telling me that's why I don't want to be with you after every time we argue, how should I feel and how would you take it? But we never break up. I think that's a sign of immaturity, frankly. And I think that first of all, I'll say what it would do to me. It will put me on edge. I don't think that's a relationship in which I can ever be comfortable in, simply because it's very shaky. That's shaky grounds, right? Every time we argue, every time we get into a disagreement, the first thing you say is, I don't really want to be with you. For me, that's signs of immaturity. And it's also a gentleman who you want to have a frank conversation with, I think, about where he really stands. Like, where does he really love you? Does he really value you? Does he really think he's able to meet your needs? Because frankly, you're going to argue. You're going to have disagreements in relationships. It happens. It's a part of relationships. It's a part of being human beings, period, right? Just forget the relationship element for a second. Part of being a human being and interacting with other human beings is knowing and understanding that there's going to be some conflict, right, within that setting, within that environment, because we think one way, our partner might think another way. So for him to go there every time you mention arguing, or every time you get into an argument, I think that's a red flag for me. And I would just have a frank conversation with him, asking him like, okay, so do you really want this relationship? Because we're going to argue, we're going to have disagreements, but when you tell me you don't really want to be with me, that makes me think differently, especially since we never break up. I think you should feel on edge. Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you from not feeling completely comfortable in that relationship, which is also why I would encourage you to have that conversation with him, because you know what, nobody want to hear that, right? After every argument, oh, I don't really want to be with you, but then you're still with me. There can be a lot of confusion for you, especially if you're young. I don't know your age, obviously, but if you're young, that can cause a lot of confusion, and ultimately lead to a lot of disappointment. So tell him to get his stuff together, or he has to go. Question number 2. What does it mean when your ex does the things you plan together with someone else? Ooh. Once again, that question is, what does it mean when your ex does the things you plan together with someone else? That can be, it could go a couple different ways. But if you want, obviously you've reached out to me, so you want my personal opinion. I think that might be a play on trying to make you jealous. All of the things that you wanted, and you believed in terms of the relationship, and you asked for him or her to go out and do it with someone else. I think that they're just trying to make you jealous, and trying to say, oh, I could do those things, or I could have done those things had we not broken up, or had you given me an opportunity. I always believe this, and I say it quite frequently. But an ex is an ex for a reason. And I know it sounds cliche as hell. I really do. But an ex really is an ex for a reason. And what you need to start thinking about is not that he or she is doing those things that you planned with someone else, but what was the lesson in that relationship that you need to extract and now move forward with, right? So instead of thinking like, oh, wow, well, how come he or she can do that with this new partner, but they didn't do it with me? Start to think more along the lines of, okay, how could I have help them to see the benefit in doing these things with me, right? How could I have established such firm boundaries that they saw that doing these things with me would enhance our relationship? Right. So start shifting that kind of your thought process. And I think you'll get more out of it that way, because there's no way you can think for someone else, or you can kind of have an idea what their vision is, or what they have going on in their mind, and why they're now doing the things that you wanted to do with someone else. And plus, I think you'll drive yourself crazy doing that. Question number 3. What happens when you don't like your husband anymore? Once again, that question is, what happens when you don't like your husband anymore? I think first of all, there's nothing wrong with that. And I know that we live in this society that's constantly like, oh my gosh, our divorce rates are so high, and I can't believe we don't have lasting relationships in our society, so on and so forth. As a relationship coach, I understand that, but I also am, in my experiences, my personal experiences, combined with my relationship coaching, I would never tell an individual to stick in a relationship that they were not happy in, right? So in this instance, if you truly don't love your husband anymore, you don't like him anymore, or you don't want to accept him unconditionally anymore, then I think you should have a conversation with him. And then based off of that conversation, if he is open and willing to do it, because a lot of men find it difficult to go to therapy, but if he's open and willing to go to therapy, I would encourage you to go to therapy with him and have a family therapy session to see if there's a way to bridge the gap between you not liking your husband now and you being madly in love with the gentleman who you would eventually call your husband. Sometimes we need to get out of our own way in marriages and go back to our why. Now, with that being said, if you go through all of this and you still don't feel like you like your husband, or your husband is someone who you want to spend a high level or a good amount of quality time with, then I would encourage you to get a divorce. I know it sucks, it's harsh, it's embarrassing, it's a lot of things that can shift your emotions. But one thing that being around someone that you don't love, or you don't have that same level of affection and appreciation for, one thing I've seen across the board 100% of the time is resentment come into play. All right. So now you go from simply not liking your husband, going through the therapy process, to ultimately hating him and then hating yourself because you stuck around in a situation that you knew was not beneficial to you in the long term. Again, most people do not want to hear that from a relationship coach. They're not used to hearing it from a relationship coach, but the reality is, I think, in my personal opinion, life is way too short to be in a relationship with someone who you don't like, quote unquote, or you just can't accept unconditionally, right? So going back to unconditional acceptance, if you can't be patient with them, knowing that they're working to become the best version of themselves, then I would say that's probably not a lasting relationship. And if you don't leave it, resentment will come into play at some point in time. Question number 4. Why does a relationship get so fragile? Once again, that question is, why does a relationship get so fragile? That's a really interesting question, actually. I thought about this as I was going through my emails before. And I'm like, I don't know. I honestly, I didn't know. But then as I was thinking through and thought through a lot of my experiences, some of the experiences of people I've been fortunate enough to work with. And what I realized is it's the shift in dynamics, right? I'll talk about it in our 5 ingredients to the lasting relationship, but the shifting dynamics within the relationship settings is huge, right? So let me elaborate on that so everyone's on the same page. A relationship can literally go from 2 people, right? So we're dating, courting each other, trying to figure out our needs and what works there, to officially like being a couple, to being engaged, to being married, to having children. And all the while you're going through these stages in life, there are external dynamics that you need to pay attention to. Right. So when a child comes into play, that's a huge dynamic shift. Think about postpartum and depression that comes with women and the hormone shift. that can be very difficult for a man. And I can attest to that myself. That can be very difficult for us to process. So to answer your question, I think what happens in relationships over time is that it becomes more and more difficult to shift with the dynamics as the dynamics shift and the communication around kind of the shift in dynamics. Or like, I still know people that don't have conversations with their significant other about postpartum, for example, right? Like something like that. I think you need to have you need to have conversations about, because a man has no idea. Like I didn't have any idea or any clue about what it was. But fortunately, my wife kind of explained it to me and explained how she felt. So I got a better understanding of that. But I think over time, man, relationships, dynamic shift, parents pass away, parents, there's so much, grandparents are pass away, great grandparents pass away. There's so much going on externally that if you don't shift with the dynamics within the relationship, I think it makes it more difficult and ultimately makes it more fragile down the line. Last question from our relationship side of things. What should I do if my sister loves my boyfriend and my boyfriend has feelings for her? Whoa, let me read that again. What should I do if my sister loves my boyfriend and my boyfriend has feelings for her? I think first of all, you need to watch who you hang around. Like I know you can't I know you can't really neglect your sister too much, but man, like how does that even, I'm always flabbergasted by, I gotta be honest, I'm always flabbergasted by like that the people who be attracted to their significant other, sister, brother, mother. Like I've never been that type of person ever that had an attraction to someone else or like someone's mom. It just I recognize that I'm unique and I'm an individual. But I don't know, man, that would rub me a strange way for sure. But in your situation, I think that first of all, I would not try to keep your boyfriend away from your sister or your sister away from your boyfriend, because I think what'll happen is they'll end up sneaking around and kind of finding each other and finding a way to be with one another in some way, shape, or form. So I would try to remove yourself from the situation, and if they connect, they connect. But I would have a conversation with my sister as well as the boyfriend about just how you feel about that situation. Because I think that if you do not express yourself or you do not communicate how you feel about this situation, you could certainly run the risk of going down a bad path, a dark path, right? Those are two of the closest people to you, or supposedly closest people to you, your boyfriend, significant other, and your sister. Those people are supposed to be close to you. Somehow they broke that kind of trust and that seal. So I would have a conversation with them and not try to be dismissive of it or just be like, oh, whatever. I don't care. Because those are the things, in my personal opinion, that lead to major barriers in your relationship going forward. All right. So as you get older, it'll become more and more difficult to trust people, and it'll also be more and more difficult to let people into your world. All right. As promised, we got this segment, Dead That Ish. And today I am going to volunteer and go first to dead an old relationship that I had. You guys know we do anonymous details here. So I will not use the actual name of the individual in which I'm deading. I'll give her a fake name, but I want to shout out Melissa this evening. Melissa, I appreciate you for telling me that I wouldn't be anything. I would never amount to anything, that I was a bum. I was all of these negative things that we always, or not always, but we often get as people in our society. I appreciate you, Melissa. I thank you, because that was the motivation that I needed to turn up. Right. And I appreciate that. You putting that perspective in place, and you can go ahead and live your life in the way that you need to live it, because you're deaded. All right, everyone. Don't forget to get those questions into us at tqlp20@gmail.com. Once again, that question is, or that email is tqlp20@gmail.com. We're back in motion, baby. We're back in motion. Don't forget, the Key ingredients, 5 of them, 5 key ingredients to a lasting relationship. Number 1 is trust. Number 2 is communication, dialogue, right? Back and forth communication with active listening. Number 3 is knowing your partner's love and apology languages. Know how to love on them, but also know how to apologize in a way that makes them feel good about your apology. Number 4, Number 4 is being able to shift with the dynamics that come. It's inevitable. There's going to be changing dynamics within your relationship. Being able to shift with the changing dynamics usually leads to a lasting relationship. And number 5, unconditional acceptance. Understanding and accepting your partner for who they are, but also knowing that they're working to be the best individual that they possibly can be in the long run. That's all we got for you guys tonight. I'm excited. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. I cannot wait to take this to that next level. I'm definitely feeling confident in where we are right now with the Quality of Love podcast. Looking forward to turning it up, man. Turning it up and taking it to that next level. Don't forget that mantra. Live it. Love it. The quality of love and relationships that you have in your life will determine the quality of your life. Peace and love.